September, on a lonely stretch of railroad track paralleling US Highway 101 near Salinas, 32 bracero farm workers lost their lives in a tragic accident. The braceros had been imported from Mexico to work on California farms. They died when their bus, which had been converted from a flatbed truck, drove in front of a freight train. No one, including the growers who employed the workers, even knew their names. Now today, thousands of farm workers live under savage conditions, beneath trees and amid garbage and human excrement. Vicious rats gnaw on them as they sleep. They walk for miles to buy food at inflated prices, and they carry in water from irrigation pumps. Now, some 800,000 underage children work with their families, harvesting crops all across America. Babies born to migrant workers suffer 25% higher infant mortality than the rest of the population. Malnutrition among migrant worker children is 10 times higher than the national rate. Farm workers' average life expectancy is still 49 years, compared to 73 years for the average American. All my life, I've been driven by one goal, one dream, one vision: to overthrow a farm labor system in this country, in this nation, that treats their farm workers as if they were not important human beings. Farm workers are not agricultural implements. Okay, they're not beasts of burden to be used and discarded. That dream was born in my youth, and it has been nurtured in my early days of organizing. It has flourished. It has been attacked. That dream, that vision, grew from my own experiences with racism, with hope, the desire to be treated fairly, and to see my people treated as human beings and not as chattel. It grew from anger and rage, emotions I felt 40 years ago when my people were denied the right to see a movie or eat at any restaurant in many parts of California. It grew from frustration and humiliation. Humiliation I felt as a boy. I couldn't understand how the growers could abuse and exploit farm workers when there's so many of us and so few of them. Later I experienced a different kind of exploitation. We, the Mexican American people, were dominated by a majority that was Anglo. Now I began to realize what the other minority people had discovered: that the only answer, the only hope, was in organizing. More of us had to become citizens. We had to register to vote. And people like me had to develop the skills it would take to organize, to educate, to empower the Chicano people. Now, all Hispanics, urban and rural and young and old, are connected to the farm workers' experience. And we had all lived through the fields, or our parents had. Now, we shared that common humiliation. How could we progress as a people, even if we lived in the cities, while the farm workers, the men and women of our color, were condemned to a life without pride? How could our people believe that their children could become doctors and lawyers and judges and business people, while this shame, this injustice was permitted to continue? Farm workers acknowledged that we had allowed ourselves to become victims in democratic society. A society where majority rule and collective bargaining are supposed to be more than academic theories or political rhetoric. And by addressing this historical problem, we created confidence and pride and hope in an entire people's ability to create the future. That we were fighting for our dignity, that we were challenging and overcoming injustice, that we were empowering the least educated, the poorest among us. The message was clear. If it could happen in the fields, it could happen anywhere. In the cities, in the courts, in the city councils, in the state legislators. I didn't really appreciate it at the time. But the coming of our union signaled the start of great changes among Hispanics that are only now beginning to be seen. Look, these trends are part of the forces of history that cannot be stopped. Okay, no person and no organization can resist them for very long. They are inevitable. Once social change begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot uneducate the person who has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. You cannot oppress the people who are no longer afraid. Now, our opponents must understand that it's not just a union we have built. Unions, like other institutions, come and go. But we're more than an institution. For nearly 20 years, our unity has been on the cutting edge of a people's cause, and you cannot do away with an entire people. You cannot stamp out a people's cause. Look, regardless of what the future holds for the union, our accomplishments cannot be undone. La causa, our cause, doesn't have to be experienced twice. The consciousness and pride that were raised by our union are alive and thriving inside millions of young Hispanics who will never work on a farm. Like the other immigrant groups, the day will come when the economic and political rewards, which are in keeping with our numbers in society, the day will come when the politicians do the right thing by our people out of political necessity and not out of charity or idealism. That day may not come this year. That day may not come during this decade. But it will come someday. And when that day comes, we shall see the fulfillment of that passage from the book of Matthew in the New Testament. That the last shall be first and the first shall be last. On that day, our nation shall fulfill its creed. And that fulfillment shall enrich us all.